Hello, I am Becca Kowalski, and this is Pirate George, and I'm going to be talking to you about my ageism survey results and their significance. So I gave the questionnaires to 2 people under 65 and 2 people over 65. The 2 people under 65 I gave it to were my mom and dad, and the 2 people over 65 I gave the survey to were to my Nana and one of my professors. I also filled one out at the beginning of the semester and again at the end of the semester to see if there would be any changes in my viewpoint due to taking gerontology class. So the questionnaire consisted of a series of 27 general statements about aging or older adults. The person filling it out then had to choose if they strongly disagreed, agreed, or strongly agreed with the statement. We then scored them in class. The lowest score you could get was 27, and the highest you could get was 135. The higher the score, the more ageist or discriminatory based on age that person is, at least according to the survey. The first time I took it, I scored a 51. When I took it again, I scored a 40, my Nana scored a 60, my mom 59, my dad 41, and my professor 36. I found it interesting that my mom and my Nana, who is my mom's mom, scored so similarly. Even when looking at the breakdown of the individual types of questions, based on apathy, stereotype, or discrimination, their scores were still very close. My dad scored lower than them, which I found makes sense because part of what he does for a living is play piano at nursing homes and care facilities for their functions that they have. So he's around older people a lot. I actually expected his score to be lower. My professor's score was very low, which I also was not surprised by. She is a very empathetic person and has done a lot of traveling, and from my point of view, sees the value in everyone. The first time I took the survey, I thought I would have gotten a lower score, but I was surprised to see it go down as much as it did when I took it the second time. I am also curious, though, as to whether it went down because my viewpoint actually changed, or just because I was thinking differently that day, or just because it's a different day, inherently I'll be in a different mood, so the score is bound to be different. There was not a big difference between the age groups. In the younger category, I had one person who scored at least 10 more points than the other, and the same went for the 2 people in the older group. So there really was no difference. They were pretty similar in their scoring. This might have been because my mom and Nana are related. Perhaps if I had picked an unrelated older adult, then the scores would have been more different. Relation was the only factor that seemed to have an effect, but the results pretty much turned out as I expected them to. For the interviews, I interviewed my mom and my professor. When I was asking my mom the questions, my dad kept butting in with his responses, so I included some of those in my answers too. Neither my mom nor my professor were surprised by their results. They did have differing views on the fairness of the questions. My professor believed that they were fair, for they covered a broad range of responses for a variety of situations and circumstances. My mom did not think some of them were fair, and she said she felt that some were not very clear. She used the old people don't need much money to meet their needs statement as an example. For if you strongly agreed with the statement, the test said that you were more ageist. But there are many elderly people who live off very little. The same is the opposite. Some elderly people spend a lot of money on things they do or do not need, and some of them spend a lot of money because they have to for medications and such. My dad interjected some thoughts about pensions and people being better off now than they were before. I didn't really understand, but he had very strong opinions on this survey not being fair. And so, anyway, my mom concluded that she thought you just had to generalize too much in taking the test. The 2 interviewees did both share the idea that they believe ageism is not an issue in their community. My mom's community is kind of just my family, our church community, and the people that she knows at my siblings' high school. She phrased her response as, "I don't think so," as in she doesn't think that her community is ageist. "I think that most people are sympathetic to old people. John, my dad, is, and I work for an old person. I don't think any people I know discriminate toward old people." So my mom does housework for this elderly person who lives near us, who's actually very crazy. My mom has very much a lot of patience for her. And I found it interesting, though, how she says that her and my dad are sympathetic towards them, so that means that she is not ageist. Now, I kind of brought that up and asked what she meant, and she says how she thinks old people are cute, but that's not discriminatory because she also thinks children are cute. And I don't think she realizes that she's being ageist when she makes that statement, but it's okay. My professor's community she was looking at is the UF campus and the greater Findlay area. She said ageism is not a concern or an issue here because the campus especially embraces varied ages, especially more than in the last 2 or 3 decades, when old meant doing little to advance the community or yourself. Older adults are not content to retire and quit now. She said that engagement in older adults continues if the individual wishes to do so. She noted Dr. Gupta, who I do not know. I don't know if I read that wrong because I was reading her handwriting, but she said this doctor taught until they were age 88. She says the greater community may need more work than the campus, but that Findlay tries to accommodate all ages through things such as Little League sports to 50 North. I think my professor had a more outward and unbiased response on this than my mom did, but her community she was looking at was also larger than my mom's community. For the last question on how the U.S. treats older adults and addressing ageism in our nation, both my mom and professor noted the good that our country does in opposition of ageism and how it falls short. My mom said it depends on where you are geographically. She said obviously there's many people in the U.S. who are discriminatory toward older adults, but obviously that's not everywhere in our country. She said in Japan, Dr. Pitt, your favorite, that people there treat older adults with the highest respect. That's when my dad cut in, and as I said earlier, he plays music at nursing homes for their events, and he brought up race and ageism, or just race in nursing homes, I guess. He said with the exception of a nursing home in Oberlin, where I live, he says he doesn't see a lot of African Americans in nursing homes. He says he doesn't know if this is due to genetics or diet or financial abilities, but that was just his observation. I then tried to bring up ageism in the media, and my dad had a retort for that, saying, quote, I studied commercialism, and they target kids and teens mostly because money doesn't have as much value to them. If anything in TV and stuff, I think they're portraying older people as being sassy. So I guess in saying that, he's saying it's not ageist to not target older adults with media because targeting kids and teens is what's going to get them money. And also that they're portraying older people as sassy and having personalities rather than just sitting on the couch, and I guess very stereotypical ways one might think of an old person living. Well, that was his opinion. So then my professor spoke more about different professions and how society views older people in the U.S. She said in broadening the scope from Findlay to the whole United States, you're going to see a difference in treatment. She mentioned the press making, quote, despairing comments on the age of drivers, but that mandatory retirement was abolished several years ago and opened the door for realizing life doesn't end at 65. I thought that was pretty interesting, as well as her saying that athletes retire when their bodies begin to wear out, not by authority demanding it, which is kind of different than we were discussing in class. We were saying how people do stop being athletic when they reach like 26 or 30 is considered old for being an athlete, but I don't know whether she was talking about just anyone who's a self-proclaimed athlete, just in their home and in their life, or everyone in like the Olympics and such. She also went on saying how musicians, painters, and educators never retire, and that retirement is only a word, not a lifestyle. So that is a good point I think she brought up, because even if you look back decades ago, centuries ago, musicians like Bach and Beethoven, like, they did music till they died, and that's what people are still doing. And it's becoming more prevalent in other areas such as education. So then, overall, she said she thinks our campus community is doing what we can to accommodate older people, and often that she thinks that ageism is found or started by well-meant comments not being thought out, and they end up being hurtful. So from her perspective, being older than my mom, society has come a long way, and she's able to recognize what good we're doing and what still needs work. So I think communities could develop education programs addressing issues of ageism by just getting people of different ages together to discuss the problems with ageism in their community. Someone such as my mom may not know how ageist people are or how they act towards older people or people of any age on a college campus, but my professor does and has insight on that. Whereas my professor may not know what ageism is like in a Catholic Church community. So if cities had meetings once a month where everyone was allowed to gather and discuss how different ages are viewed in their city, it would build understanding, and you'd be able to start with ageism in your own circle, and then you could build out into the United States. People hearing people they also respect in their communities, that also may help them more than hearing some professor talk about ageism in our world. I know my dad would probably listen to somebody who respected in our church community more than he may listen to me as a college student. So then besides these monthly meetings, making sure to have interaction of all ages in the community, you could have children visiting nursing homes or elderly people at schools, or teens making sure they're working with people who are middle-aged or other ages at their jobs. So to conclude, I think the main lesson or theme to be taken away from this process is that we all age. The majority of us are going to become old people. Well, all of us age, except for Pirate George. But all people age. And that's okay. That's what's supposed to happen. Yes, there are many changes, and some of them are considered negative, but there's negative aspects to being any age. We need to have understanding of equality as humans from conception to death. If you fit anywhere in that spectrum, you are a valuable human being. We need to not be afraid to have discussions about ageism and aging, and to get rid of stigmas by interacting with people of all ages on the regular. We can all learn something from one another, as well as give insight to each other. As humans, I believe we're meant to serve each other, and the more value we can see everyone in everyone, the easier that will become. So that concludes my presentation. I would ask if you have any questions, but you can't answer that. So thanks for a great semester, Dr. Pitt. Pirate George does not come to your class, but I'm sure he would have appreciated it. Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good aging process. Okay, the button's not working. That would have been a really great ending.